The night had been restless. Deep in the wilderness, where the sounds of nature usually blended into a harmonious lull, something had disrupted the silence. A commotion, a ruckus, loud and undeniable, had stirred the stillness of the dark, the kind that made even the most seasoned adventurers sit up in their tents, listening, waiting. And then, as the morning light cracked through the dense canopy, the evidence was there. Drag marks, thick, deep grooves in the soft earth, like the scars of something heavy being pulled against its will. The expedition team, seasoned trackers with years of experience in the field, gathered around the markings. Silence hung over them, heavy with speculation. What had been taken? And more importantly, what had done the taking? With the kind of reverence reserved for a sacred discovery, they followed the trail, step by step, moving cautiously, their eyes scanning for more clues. The forest, alive with its usual whispers, seemed to hold its breath as they moved forward. Each dragged indentation in the ground led them closer, drawing them deeper into the unknown. Then, to their absolute amazement, it was there. The path of destruction led straight into a room. The realization hit like a shockwave. Whatever had been dragged, whatever force had done the dragging, had gone into that room. And then, unexplainably,
and to your absolute amazement, it has dragged it into the room. I have no words. Unbelievable.
Had vanished. The tension was palpable. Then, movement. A shadow flickered across the dimly lit interior, and before anyone could react, it was there. "Careful," one of them whispered, urgency sharpening the air. "There it goes." Something massive, something powerful, had been in that space all along, hiding, waiting, watching. And now, as if sensing the growing fear, it was on the move. A crash, a blur of movement. The team scrambled, instincts kicking in. Cameras swung up, hands reached for whatever protection they could muster. But whatever had been lurking had made its decision. It was done hiding. "Oh my God," someone exhaled, voice shaky with adrenaline. "That is so crazy." No one knew what to say. The footage, later reviewed, would show the purest form of human reaction. Raw fear, awe, disbelief. The expedition had barely begun, and already they were in the presence of something beyond explanation. For nearly a decade, a single photograph had fueled relentless debate within the cryptid hunting community. Dubbed the Ranchita Wood Ape photo, the image depicted an imposing figure, hulking, shadowed, and unmistakably humanoid.
Zach, that thing just stood up like you and I would just stand up. Look at that. Dude!
To many, it was the definitive proof they had been waiting for. Bigfoot was real. Skeptics, however, weren't so easily convinced. Too many photos, too many grainy images that could easily be explained away. But this one had something different. The proportions, the posture, the eerie lifelike quality of its stance. It wasn't just another smudge of pixels. For the team, the need to investigate was irresistible. The search for Bigfoot had always been a game of patience and perseverance. Every shred of evidence, every clue had to be examined. So, they traced the image's origins, hoping to separate truth from lies. Their journey led them not to the dense, impenetrable forests of North America, but instead, oddly, to Southern California. And there, the trail took an unexpected turn. At the center of it all, a man named Mark Anders, a former comedian, a self-proclaimed bodybuilding instructor, and a man with an undeniable fascination with apes. His past was littered with failed entertainment ventures, including an obscure comedy show that never quite gained traction. When his ambitions in humor fizzled out, Anders found himself drawn to something new: Bigfoot. Utilizing an astonishingly high-quality costume, he and a collaborator began staging elaborate hoaxes. They filmed in various locations, carefully curating their content to appear authentic. Each video, each still image, was carefully crafted to feed into the growing legend. And yet, what made the Ranchita Wood Ape photo stand apart was its sheer believability. Even with the hoax exposed, even with the truth laid bare, the image retained an unsettling power. For those who had spent years searching for answers, it remained a symbol, a representation of how the line between reality and myth blurred so easily in the pursuit of the unknown. "Well," one investigator muttered after reviewing the case, "I guess this is what happens when entertainment ambitions collide with cryptid culture." The discovery was disappointing, but for the expedition team, it only strengthened their resolve. If fakes like this could be so convincing, what else was lurking out there, waiting to be uncovered? Unraveling the unnatural. As the team processed their findings, a new anomaly demanded their attention. A snake skin, stretching an unfathomable 21 meters in length. Even among the most seasoned explorers, silence fell at the sight of it. The sheer scale was almost incomprehensible. A beast of this size, how had it remained hidden? And more importantly, was it still out there? The leader of the expedition, a man known for his measured skepticism, ran a hand along the massive abandoned skin. Why, he mused aloud, would something like this exist in the first place? The discovery was made in a remote jungle, an environment thick with mystery. There were places in the world where nature still ruled, where creatures unseen by modern eyes thrived in the shadows. This was one of those places. For the team, it was another reminder of how little humans truly understood the wilderness. Every turn, every new finding, deepened the sense that something monumental was just beyond reach, watching, waiting. They had set out in search of Bigfoot, but it was becoming clear that they were uncovering something much bigger. And as the next leg of their journey began, one thing was certain: this was just the beginning. The bald mystery in the woods. The debate raged on. For years, the cryptid community had dissected, analyzed, and argued over one singular image. An image that, at first glance, seemed like just another questionable sighting, until experts began pointing out the impossible. The creature, captured mid-stride near the dense underbrush of an undisclosed location, had a strange, unnatural shine to its head. Not the shaggy, unkempt mane of a wild beast, but something smooth, reflective, bald. Digital imaging experts scrutinized every pixel, each shadow and highlight. They posed an unsettling question. If this were a bear, where was its fur? No bear, at least not one found in these forests, would sport such a feature. The light source beamed off its head in a way that made it almost otherworldly. But skepticism is the bedrock of any true investigation. Some dismissed the claim outright, calling it a weak argument, a desperate grasp at something beyond nature. It's a nitpick, one analyst scoffed, nothing more than a trick of light and shadow. Yet, as the discussion deepened, a far more pressing question emerged. Why was there only one photo? Modern photography has made it almost impossible to take just a single shot. Phones and cameras defaulted to burst mode, capturing sequences rather than solitary frames. Yet here, in the midst of what should have been a groundbreaking discovery, there was just one image. The figure wasn't running. It wasn't evading capture. It stood, solid and unmoving, within plain sight. So why, if the photographer had the perfect opportunity, had they failed to take more? Some theorized it could be the elusive skunk ape, Florida's own cryptid, known for its stealth and pungent odor. Others weren't so sure. There was something off about this photo, something carefully curated. The expedition team sat around their campfire that night, passing the image between them. Their search was already riddled with hoaxes and dead ends, but their instincts told them to press on. If this was a trick, it was a well-orchestrated one. But if it wasn't, then they were standing on the edge of something far greater than they'd ever imagined. Unidentified mysteries in the sky. As the expedition trudged deeper into the wilderness, a new anomaly reached their ears, not from the ground, but from the sky. A video, taken from West Virginia's Snowshoe Mountain Resort, was making waves. Something unknown, had been spotted streaking across the heavens. The footage was brief but haunting. A formation of lights moved in unison, carving a deliberate pattern through the night sky. Not a drone, not a satellite, something different. "That's insane," one of the researchers muttered, eyes fixed on the screen. "I've seen Starlink. I know what that looks like. But this," no one had an answer. Since the dawn of modern aviation, reports of unidentified aerial phenomena had surfaced in whispers and classified documents. The U.S. government had at times acknowledged and dismissed them, citing military experiments or weather balloons. But this was different. Even with the evidence before them, questions swirled. What was the purpose? Why were they moving in such tight synchronization? And if this was an orchestrated event, who was orchestrating it? The team had come to the wilderness in search of creatures that lurked in the shadows, but they were quickly realizing that the unknown wasn't confined to the earth beneath their feet. Something was watching. The Sarasota Encounter. December 22nd, just days before Christmas, the quiet community in Sarasota County, Florida, was wrapped in the usual seasonal stillness. Families prepared for holiday gatherings. Children dreamt of gifts under the tree. But for one family, that night brought something far beyond festive cheer. It began with a sound, a violent, jarring crash from their backyard deck. Furniture scraping, wood splintering, the kind of disturbance that sent a spike of adrenaline through the veins. Then came something far worse. A smell. Not just any odor, but something deep, guttural, rancid, like decay mingled with damp earth and unwashed fur. It rolled into the house like an invisible wave, thick enough to make eyes water. Heart pounding, one of them crept toward the window, phone in hand. Slowly, cautiously, they lifted the camera. What they saw made their blood run cold. A massive, hair-covered figure lumbered through the backyard, its shoulders hunched, its arms swaying heavily at its sides. It wasn't running. It wasn't even moving with urgency. It knew it was being watched, and it didn't care. The first instinct? An orangutan. It had to be. Surely an escape from a local zoo. But even as they whispered the possibility, doubt crept in. No zoo had reported a missing animal. Their minds raced for another explanation, but they had none. The next morning, shaken and still reeling from the encounter, they sent the photo to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. Within hours, whispers of the skunk ape, Florida's own legend, began circulating. Local cryptid researcher Dave Shealy, a veteran in the field, examined the evidence. For years, he had maintained that something lived in these swamps. He had cast footprints, documented sightings, followed leads deep into the Floridian wilderness. And now, he had new evidence. The footprint cast from the Sarasota backyard was unlike anything found in the region. It was massive, larger than any known primate, too large to be an orangutan, too structured to be a bear. Skeptics dismissed it, as they always did. A hoax, a misidentification. But those who had smelled the air that night, who had heard the weight of something enormous shifting across their deck, knew better. The creature was real, and it was still out there. The beast of Brassknocker Hill. The wilderness has always held its secrets. Some, whispered in local legends, take years to resurface. Others, like the mystery that gripped Somerset in the summer of 1979, explode into public consciousness overnight. It all started with a tree. Ron and Betty Harper had lived near Brassknocker Hill, just outside of Bath, for decades. Their land, bordered by thick woodlands, had never been anything but peaceful. But one morning in July of 1979, that peace was shattered. The massive oak tree that stood at the edge of their property, one that had stood unscathed for generations, had been completely stripped of its bark. Deep gouges, unnaturally large, marred its once smooth surface. At first, it was just one tree, then another, then dozens. By August 1st, more than 50 trees had been violently attacked. Their branches, some torn away at heights of over 50 feet, dangled like limp limbs. Experts were baffled. The force required to do such damage was beyond anything seen in the region. Whatever was responsible had teeth 20 times larger than a squirrel's, a predator of formidable strength. And then, the silence came. Veteran foresters and locals alike reported something even more chilling than the destruction. The forest had gone still. No birds, no rustling leaves, no life. Animals had vanished. The squirrels that once darted playfully between trees were gone. The dawn chorus of birdsong was eerily absent. It was as if the entire ecosystem had recoiled from something unnatural. Then came the sightings. The first credible report came from Christopher Morris, a driver who, on a routine route through Moncton Combe, saw something that made his blood run cold. A 4-foot-long, bear-like creature, its piercing, white-rimmed eyes glowing in the darkness. Morris was just the beginning. More and more witnesses emerged, describing something between a baboon, a chimpanzee, a gibbon, and a lemur. It had the intelligence of a primate, the power of a predator, and the agility of something that had no place in England's forests. Panic took hold. The Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCA, issued warnings. Locals, fearing for their safety, took up arms. A man in his 80s, undeterred by his age, patrolled nightly with a shotgun, determined to defend his home. Even the police weren't immune to the chaos. Inspector Michael Price, a veteran officer, saw it with his own eyes, a feral chimpanzee, loose and untamed. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The trees remained scarred, but the attacks ceased. The deafening silence of the forest lifted, replaced by the cautious return of birds and small animals. The beast, whatever it had been, was gone. Had it moved on? Had it ever existed at all? The mystery of Brassknocker Hill became one of England's most bizarre unsolved cryptid cases, a legend that refused to fade. But for those who had heard the unnatural silence, seen the destruction firsthand, and peered into those glowing eyes, one thing was certain: something had been there, and it could return. The Watcher in the Barn. Not all cryptid sightings happen in the depths of the forest. Sometimes the unknown creeps closer, to the edges of civilization, where human eyes and cameras await. A red barn, standing solitary against the landscape, had already become the focal point of a viral Bigfoot sighting. The first report had sparked heated debates. The footage, grainy and fleeting, showed something lurking near the structure, a hulking figure, just out of reach of clarity. Now, the man who had captured that footage was back. Determined to settle the mystery once and for all, he patrolled his property, camera in hand. And then, he saw it again. There, just behind the barn, a dark figure stood, motionless. His pulse quickened. He had convinced himself that his first sighting wasn't a trick of the mind, that something real had been there. But now, looking at this second encounter, doubt crept in. This time, it wasn't moving. The outline seemed too still, too rigid. A tree, maybe? Or could it be something propped up against the barn, deliberately placed to feed the legend? The internet erupted into speculation. Some believed, others scoffed. I bought into the first one, the narrator admitted, reviewing the footage. But this one? I don't know. It was the eternal problem of cryptid research. What's real? What's hoax? What's the trick of the eye? There was only one way to know for sure. He had to go closer. The unseen observer. After hours of tension, speculation, and analysis, the expedition needed a break. The intensity of the search for Bigfoot, the skunk ape, and now the brass-knocker beast had left them wound tight. Then, out of nowhere, a moment of levity. A prank? Maybe. A genuine sighting? That was up for debate. The camera panned, catching an unexpected figure in the distance. Unmistakably human but moving oddly, almost too fluidly for comfort. Laughter broke the tension. Was it a well-placed joke? A subtle nod to the absurdity of chasing shadows? Or was there something deeply unnerving about the way it just stood there, watching? The team exchanged glances, unsure whether to brush it off or to feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon them. Because in the wilderness, not everything strange hides in the shadows. Sometimes it watches from the light, the legacy of the unexplained. The wilderness has always held its mysteries, but not all are born of shadowed forests and elusive beasts. Some mysteries are man-made, shaped by catastrophe, left to fester in forgotten corners of the world. One such place? Chernobyl. The very name conjures images of desolation. A city abandoned in haste, a place where nature had been forever altered by humanity's recklessness. But among the ghosts of its past, life persisted, wild, mutated, and resilient. For decades, the wildlife of Chernobyl had been a subject of both fascination and fear. Some species thrived in the absence of humans, reclaiming the poisoned land as their own. Others bore the marks of radiation, grotesque mutations, warped bodies, unnatural growths. The expedition team, having spent days chasing creatures of legend, found themselves contemplating something equally bizarre: what we leave behind. The expedition was coming to an end, but as the team packed their equipment and prepared to return to the world of the known, one truth remains unshaken. The unknown was still out there. They had ventured into the forests, the swamps, the forgotten places of the world. They had followed the tracks, heard the whispers, and seen the evidence. And yet, for every answer they found, more questions arose. The search for Bigfoot was never just about proving its existence. It was about the pursuit of something greater, the understanding that some things remain hidden because they choose to be. Maybe Bigfoot was out there, watching from the trees just beyond reach. Maybe the skunk ape still lurked in Florida's swamps, waiting for the next unsuspecting witness. Maybe the beast of Brassknocker Hill would return one day, its silence broken once more. Or maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to find them. The night was calm as they made their way back, the hum of civilization growing louder. Yet, even as they left, something in the wild remained unchanged. A rustling in the underbrush, a shape that disappeared before the human eye could focus, a feeling that someone or something was still watching. Because legends don't die, they wait, and one day, when the time is right, they will return. The hunt never truly ends.